Hello, dear students uh, and the members of the fraternity of medicine. Hope you all are doing well, staying indoors, staying safe, and following the norms of social distancing and personal hygiene. Now, in these periods of lockdown and staying indoors, many students have been asking me the queries related to uh, the body weight, that they are worried they are likely to gain weight by the time of this period of inactivity. So I decided to take this topic of energy homeostasis and energy balance of the body. In otherwise routine life also, I've been running an obesity clinic, and this is my experience that the weight loss is a very tough bargain. There is initial weight loss that happens with rigorous exercises and strict diet regimens. Many people even follow the extreme sorts of diets, starvation, keto diets, and so on. After the initial weight loss, there is a plateau that is reached beyond which the weight loss does not happen. Well, I've also seen this the other way around. The people who are trying to gain weight, it's a tough ask. Beyond a certain limit, they are just not able to gain weight, howsoever high protein diet and high carbs they are taking. So, it's an interesting topic how the energy homeostasis of the body works. So, let's try to understand a few basic principles related to this. Now, to begin with, our energy homeostasis works at two levels. A, on a short-term basis, how the body decides about the energy consumption. Now, so far as the eating of the foodstuffs is concerned, short-term basis means in a day-to-day life, there are a few mechanisms that work on this short-term basis. For instance, stretch receptors in the stomach wall. When we consume the foodstuffs and the stomach is distended, the stretch receptors in the stomach wall are stimulated, and they send the signals via the vagi, the vagus nerve, and this is the signaling regarding the fullness. So, beyond a certain point of stimulation of those stretch receptors, we really sense that fullness, which is the signal being sent by the vagus nerve, and then further eating will be curtailed, further eating will be stopped. So, that's a short-term mechanism of how much food consumption will happen daily. It varies from person to person depending upon the capacity of the stomach and stimulation of those stretch receptors in the stomach wall. The second short-term mechanism which works on a day-to-day basis is in the form of the hormones or the ligands. Two candidates have been attributable in this regard. The candidates which work for either satiety or hunger on a short-term basis, and those candidate ligands are, one is thought to be the CCK, the hormone that after the eating of meals, the hormone that conveys the sense of satiety, and the other one which works on a short-term basis is the hormone ghrelin. Now, this ghrelin is secreted by the stomach. Its secretion increases 1 to 2 hours before the actual eating, and this ghrelin, which is actually released by the oxyntic glands in the stomach wall, it is known to promote the feeding. So, it initiates hunger or initiates feeding. So these are the hormones. In fact, those who undergo gastric bypass surgeries for the sake of obesity, the capacity of the stomach is decreased, but apart from that, this signal of ghrelin is said to be abolished. So the feeding signal is said to be inhibited because the ghrelin secretion will also stop after the surgery. So that's one advantage of such surgeries which are performed on obese persons. So these are the short-term mechanisms involved in the feeding behavior and therefore energy storage. There are long-term mechanisms at work. What are the long-term mechanisms? Now at the outset, let me say, as I said in the beginning, that weight loss is a very tough task. Even weight gain, but particularly the weight loss is a very tough task, because the hypothalamic neurons, so far as the energy homeostasis is concerned, those hypothalamic neurons are said to have a set point, and unless that set point is shifted downward, the person's weight will not be lost. I mean, the fat stores will not be mobilized, energy will not be spent, and weight loss will not happen beyond a certain point. Initial weight loss does happen because of the caloric restriction and spending of the energy via exercises. So let's understand what is this set point. So far as the long-term mechanism is concerned, two hormones have been implicated in this. One is insulin. Insulin, as you all are aware, it's an anabolic hormone. I mean, it's a hormone of energy conservation. So whenever we eat foodstuffs, the nutrients are compartmentalized by the insulin. I mean, if there is glucose which is consumed, then it has to be converted into glycogen. The fats need to be stored in the fatty tissue. So all this compartmentalization and storage of energy is the function of insulin on a long-term basis, of course. And the other candidate is the hormone leptin. Well, leptin is relatively recent in its discovery. Just about 30-35 years ago, leptin and its role was really discovered in the energy homeostasis. So what is this leptin and how does it work? Well, leptin is a protein of 146 amino acids. Its molecular mass is about 15 kilodaltons. And this is a hormone released by the adipocytes. Now basically, you know, the fat cells are of two types, so the fatty tissue is of two types. There is a white adipose tissue, then there is a brown adipose tissue. This white adipose tissue and these adipocytes, they are known to release the leptin. Now this leptin, which is released by the white adipose tissue, the fat cells or adipocytes, will then reach the hypothalamus. It has got receptors in the hypothalamus. It is basically a signaling molecule, and it is signaling the body and signaling the hypothalamus regarding the energy stores of the body, energy reserves of the body and energy stores. So hypothalamus has leptin receptors. Now where those receptors are located? There is a nucleus in the hypothalamus called as arcuate nucleus. This arcuate nucleus of hypothalamus is said to have the leptin receptors. And then for instance, how does it work? If the body mass or rather fat mass of the body has increased, fatty tissue has increased, obesity level has increased, then there is increased level of circulating leptin. Leptin release is also increased, and it signals the hypothalamus and it signals the arcuate nucleus about this, that the fat mass has increased, and then the energy balance will be shifted towards energy consumption instead of energy conservation. So, food intake will be decreased and energy will be spent, so that the fat mass is maintained at a certain level. So, you see, there is a set point to which the leptin is working. I mean, I may add here that many of the hypothalamic neurons or nuclei, they work on the basis of set point. For instance, temperature regulation as controlled by hypothalamus. They work like a thermostat. They have a set point. So, if the temperature is increased, it should be brought back to normal and decreased. If it is decreased, then it will be increased and brought back to the set point. So, that set point is a fixed point. Under certain conditions, that set point is shifted upward or downward. So, similar case is happening here as well. There is a set point to which the leptin mechanism is working, and so increased adiposity, increased circulating levels of leptin. Leptin will act on the hypothalamic nucleus, particularly the arcuate nucleus, and then this in effect will decrease the energy consumption, and energy will be spent more and conserved less. So, how does that happen? I mean, feeding will be decreased. If the body fat mass has increased, then feeding, intake of food will be decreased. How does that happen? Now, arcuate nucleus has two types of neurons. One for the satiety, anorexia, satiety, decreased appetite, decreased food intake, and the other one are for feeding or hunger, increased appetite. So far as the satiety producing neurons are concerned, they have these neurotransmitters. One is of course CART. The full form is cocaine and amphetamine regulated transcript. This is a neurotransmitter that's involved in the satiety signal. Whereas feeding and hunger, there is one more candidate. Those neurons also have POMC, pro-opiomelanocortin, or simply they are called as melanocortin neurons. So, these are the candidates that produce satiety, decreased appetite. So, leptin action, whenever there is increased level of fat mass and increased circulating levels of leptin, then via arcuate nucleus, these neurons will be stimulated, so that there is decrease in the food intake. Satiety will be promoted faster, there will be decrease in the food intake and increased energy consumption. Energy spent will be more, so that the fat mass is maintained at a particular level. It works like a classic negative feedback. On the other hand, feeding and hunger promoting neurons, nerve cells in the hypothalamus, what are their neurotransmitters? One candidate is said to be neuropeptide Y. These are called as orexigenic neurons. Remember, orexigenic neurons which promote hunger, and these are anorexigenic neurons which promote satiety. They will decrease the food intake. So, neuropeptide Y, and one more, agouti related peptide. agouti related peptide. These two peptides are known to promote hunger. So, if the weight has been gained, then there will be increased circulating levels of leptin. They will act on the hypothalamic receptors, particularly on the arcuate nucleus, and then satiety will be promoted, means these neurons will be stimulated and the neurons that promote feeding and hunger will be inhibited so that the person feels less hungry, so that less energy intake happens and more of energy is spent and the body mass is maintained, fat mass is maintained. Well then, if that is the case, then why people suffer from obesity? If we have such a classic negative feedback action to maintain the body weight and to maintain the fat mass of the body, why do people suffer from obesity? The reason is said to be leptin resistance. I mean, obese people, they have increased fatty tissue, increased adipose tissue, so there are increased circulating levels of leptin have been found, but then they fail to act on the leptin receptors on the hypothalamus, in the hypothalamus, and therefore that's called as leptin resistance. And therefore leptin, although its levels are high in the circulation, it is unable to act, it is unable to promote satiety or suppress hunger. So you will always very often find that obese people, their hunger is also actually increased instead of suppressed. So negative feedback is clearly not working, and that results in obesity and increased fat mass. I'll just add one more point here. What are the other hypothalamic areas which are associated with satiety or hunger? Well, these neurons, satiety producing neurotransmitters of the arcuate nucleus and the other neurons which promote hunger, they are known to act via the other areas of the hypothalamus. For instance, there is ventromedial nucleus of hypothalamus. So the neurons of the arcuate nucleus, when they are stimulated for satiety, they will cause firing of the ventromedial nucleus of hypothalamus, and then that results in satiety. Satisfaction comes early after eating, that's satiety. Whereas when the neurons of the arcuate nucleus having these neurotransmitters, neuropeptide Y and agouti related peptide, when they start firing, they excite another area of the hypothalamus which is called as lateral hypothalamic area, or simply called as lateral hypothalamus. And when this fires, it results in hunger, increased appetite and increased food intake. So as I mentioned, in obese individuals, I mean, why there is weight gain when we have such an excellent mechanism to control the weight and control the fat mass, is because the leptin mechanism is not working. Leptin is supposed to maintain the body fat and the body weight up to a certain set point. In obese individuals, it's not working. The second hypothesis is that the set point of that maintenance of body fat and maintenance of body weight has shifted upward. So in spite of the fact that already the fat mass has increased, there is further feeding and further hunger. Energy is more and more conserved, so the fat mass and body weight goes on increasing. So what I'm trying to say here is that there are no quick fix solutions for the weight loss. Unless the energy homeostasis and its balance is properly shifted towards the lower points, the weight loss will not occur on a long term basis. Let me just add one more nucleus here involved in the energy homeostasis, the hypothalamic nucleus, which is paraventricular nucleus. This paraventricular nucleus, apart from the other two nuclei which I mentioned just now, is also involved in the hunger and satiety. Well, it is known to synthesize oxytocin, which is then released from the posterior pituitary gland. But these neurons of the paraventricular nucleus are also known to project to the brainstem nuclei, and from there they are known to alter the functioning of the autonomic nervous system. So even these neurons are involved in satiety or hunger. So that is in short the energy homeostasis of the body. Well, just last point related to the leptin. Leptin, body weight and reproductive function. Leptin has been implicated in the onset of puberty. This is a recent finding because see, already it is known that the cyclic and pulsatile secretion of GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone from hypothalamus, will lead to the onset of puberty. Now that's known already. Where does the leptin fit into this scheme? Look, it is observed that unless a certain weight is gained, onset of puberty does not happen. What does that mean? I mean, particularly it has been observed in females. The girls, unless they attain a certain body weight and a certain fat mass, they do not attain puberty. It has been observed that those who are involved in extreme athletics in that age group, they may attain, they start menstruating and then the menstruation stops. Later they go into amenorrhea. Now why does this happen? Is because when the person attains a certain weight and certain fat mass, there are increased levels of leptin. As we mentioned already that the adipocytes release leptin, and this leptin then signals the hypothalamus. Hypothalamic neurons are signaled so that then there would be stimulation of hypothalamo-hypophyseal axis, hypothalamus and pituitary axis. There will be increased levels of or rather cyclic or pulsatile secretion of gonadotropin releasing hormone, increased levels of pituitary gonadotropins, and that will result in puberty, onset of puberty. So leptin has also been implicated in the onset of puberty by its signaling to the hypothalamus. So this is the energy balance of the body, and certain ligands, hormones, neurotransmitters involved in the overall scheme of energy balance. But just remember, leptin is a hormone that's going to signal the body, signal the hypothalamus about the adequate storage of energy in the form of fats, okay, and it will prevent further storage of energy in the form of fat by decreasing the hunger, decreasing the energy intake, and increasing the energy consumption, energy spent. So that's a negative feedback. When that stops happening, when there is leptin resistance, it results in obesity, and leptin works on a particular set point level. So remember, be active even if you are indoors. Try to make some physical activity. Restrict your diets to a certain caloric portions. Eat in small portions. That's the way to remain healthy and not allow your fat mass to grow even when you are staying at home. So that was a small topic for today.